Hello, you guys. Luxira Moon Goddess. And today we are going to be discussing become confident in your craft by doing. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, when you're practicing magic or if you're just starting out in magic, the only way for you to be confident in your craft in your practices is by doing. So, that's the only way that you're going to get better at it. It's no different than, if you were learning any other type of skill. If you were learning how to play a sport, if you were learning how to play an instrument. The only way that you're going to truly get better at it is by doing it. So, with that being said, do not be afraid. Don't be afraid of messing up or don't be afraid of making a mistake. And I'm going to tell you as to why that is. You're going to make mistakes. It's just going to happen. It's no different than when you're living your life and you're making mistakes. All you have to do is, if you make a mistake, is that you learn from it. But that the fear of making mistakes should not deter you from growing in your magical journey. So, with that being said, and you have to also stop and think about this as well. Even if you don't know where to start, or even if you don't know what you're doing, it is a learning process. There's plenty of books. There's plenty of information online. Especially, we're in the age of technology, the age of the internet. We have, social media. There's different websites. There's blogs. There's all of this information at your fingertips that can help guide you through learning your magical practices. But with going back on what's at hand, you have to do it. Don't be afraid of, even if you don't know what you're doing for a spell, and with magic, I believe that when you're practicing magic, being creative is really beneficial for doing magic, because when you're very creative, you're not afraid to experiment. You're not afraid to try something different. Yes, there are books with, spells already pre-made that you can copy. But I have found when I'm doing magic, the most powerful spells are the ones that I create on my own using my own intuition. So, with that being said, and that's a good point, listen to your intuition. Don't be afraid of what your mind is telling you. You may be reading something in a book about, let's say if you're doing, like, for example, a love spell. And, something in your mind says, well, what if I try this type of oil? Or what if I try, substituting this herb for that herb? Don't be afraid to tweak it. Don't be afraid to tweak it, because, with magic, it really is about creativity. And because you have to also stop and think. The person who created a spell, what works for them may not necessarily work for you. So you may run into an instance where you're going to need to adjust and tweak a spell. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, because you have to do what's best for you. You have to create a spell that's going to be working for you and what's best for you. So, with that being said, when you're practicing magic, when you're doing spell work, when you're doing, even if it's like, divination, or even if you're doing something like learning oracle cards, you have to do it. You just have to do the work. Even if let's say, for example, oh, well, I don't know how to read oracle cards, I don't really understand, how it works, or I don't understand how to do tarot cards. Just get into it. Practice doing a reading for yourself. Ask yourself a question. Is there something in your life that you're questioning? Practice using the cards. Get in the habit, if you make it a regular part of your magical life, then that's more, you're doing more and it's becoming normal to you, because you're becoming more familiar with using the oracle cards. You can draw a card every other day. You can draw a card, draw some cards, once a week. And once you just get your foot in the door and you start doing it, that's going to build your confidence because you're taking the time and you're doing the work and you're practicing and practicing and practicing. So I cannot stress it enough. The only way for you to become more confident in your craft, in doing magic, is by doing. hmm So, with that being said, don't be afraid to really get into magic. Don't be afraid to go ahead and do. And especially if you're, even if you, because some people want to take it, some people are into magic. Some people want to do it, on a level of, oh, well, I want to be a professional oracle card reader. Or, oh, I want to become, do spells for other people. Some people want to turn it into a business, and that's fine. But even with that being said, at the end of the day, you're truly doing magic for yourself, because it's something that you're truly into. It's something that you're passionate about. So when, it's no different than when people say, choose a career that you're going to love, choose a career that's, you're interested, that you love. When you're really, really love something and you're very interested in something, you're going to do it even more than what you would do if you weren't truly into it, because it's something that you love. It's going to be something that you look forward to. So when you're looking forward to it, you're going to look forward to waking up and pulling those oracle cards. You're going to wake up and look forward to creating new spells. And especially once you start getting the hang of it, once you start, you know, getting the hang of it and you do it more and more, you're going to realize, okay, well, I did this spell the other day, and I noticed I got these results, this spell worked. Or you may do a spell because it may just happen, and it's going to happen. You may do a spell and it's like, oh, well, I tried this. I used these herbs, these oils, and this spell really it wasn't very effective, and it really didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. It's very handy to, what's really helpful is if you keep a journal or a small notebook, and, especially if you're creating spells, have a spell book. Write down, the spells that you have, and make notes of the ingredients you use, not ingredients, but, what you're using. What herbs did you use? How did you do the spell? What color candles did you use? And make notes of what you're doing. This, when you're making notes of what you're using, when you're making notes of what you're doing, and you write down the results, this is the fastest way for you to improve and the fastest way for you to get better at magic. Because you're making note of what you did, you're making note of what works, and then you're making note of what didn't work. So when you're making these notes, you're going to realize a pattern of, oh, well, I use these herbs. I like working with these types of herbs. I'm getting a lot of results manifesting when I use this. Or, I did an attraction spell and I noticed that this oil was really effective. Da 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 da. And so you're going to notice a pattern. And you're going to improve faster because you're realizing what works and what doesn't work. So that is the fastest way for you to really improve. And again, when it comes to going back into what I was talking about, there's lots of knowledge and lots of information. You know, because a lot of people, especially if you don't know what you're doing in the beginning, you're going to be tempted to copy spells exactly. But as I said earlier, you know, I would rather you take it, and be inspired instead of copying, every single spell that someone else does. You know, because again, you have that creativity, and the most important thing, the thing that I've learned about creating spells is intuition. Listen to your intuition. Listen to your intuition. You have it for a reason. Your intuition is what guides you into the right direction when it comes to magical practices. hmm So with that being said, with that being said, get inspired rather than copying. You know, and you can even take it a step further. When you see somebody online, let's say you're watching a video on how to manifest or attraction spell or what have you. You could be watching this person doing a spell, and then you can ask yourself, okay, well, they did XYZ in this video. How could I do it better? How would I do it? Ask yourself, see it from that standpoint instead of necessarily, if you're really a true beginner and you're in the beginning stages, then you may copy a couple spells. But really, you want to grow and you want to figure out how to do it yourself. So ask yourself, okay, they did it this way, but how would I do it in a better way? No, they use these type of herbs. What if I substituted those herbs for these ones instead? See it from that standpoint, because again, you can't be afraid of experimenting when you're doing magic, when you're practicing magic. It is a learning process, and it is truly a magical journey. So, don't be afraid. Have confidence. And the best way for you to get confidence is again by doing. The more you do, the more you're going to learn. It's no different, see yourself as a student of magic. Because really, it's going to take time, especially if you're a beginner, especially if you're just starting out. It's going to take time. You're not going to be, especially if you aspire to do magic as, you want magic to be your career, you want to be a professional tarot card reader, oracle card reader, or what have you. It's going to take time. It's just going to take time, and there's no way to skip around it other than doing. So, with that being said, do not be afraid to do your magic. If you make it a regular practice and you can start out small. Try incorporating magic into your everyday life. You can do something magical, a couple of days a week. Today, I'm going to push myself. You know what? I'm going to try to create, a glamour spell. Or, I'm going to try to teach myself how to make a gree or mojo bag. That's how you push yourself. When you put it in your lifestyle and you set, see it as something fun. Because for me, magic is something I do. It helps me spiritually, but it truly is fun and enjoyable for me to do. So with that being said, see yourself, experiment, set up, for example, goals for yourself. I'm going to try to create a beauty spell. I want to create a glamour spell. And when you do things, and once you do get used to making spells, and especially when you make a spell that works, you're going to be like, oh, you know what? This wasn't so difficult. Or you know what? I'm glad that, I used these herbs for this spell. I didn't think that it was going to work, but you know what? It turned out great, and I got the desired results. So, with that being said, do not be afraid to do your magic. Do not be afraid. Especially, again, if you're doing it for yourself, the only way for you to improve is by doing. And the more you do, the more you learn, and the more you're going to improve. So, that is all I have for this one, and I will check you guys later in another one. Bye-bye!